All right, let's get started. So thank you again for joining us for the virtual open day for the MA in Art History and Conservation of Buddhist Heritage. I guess we will introduce the three of us who you see on the screen. I will start. My name is Lori Wong. I am one of the faculty members on this MA program, and I teach the conservation part of this interdisciplinary program.
Hi everyone, I'm Sujata Migama and I'm the art historian on this MA program. And I will pass it on to Alex now.
Hi there, and I'm Alex Hawkins. I'm the admissions and enrollment manager here at the Courtauld, and I'll be talking about some of the practical parts of applying and accommodation, fees and funding.
Great. So we are just going to spend the next 30 minutes introducing this MA program. And we encourage you to put questions that you have in the Q&A as we go along. And we're going to leave enough time at the end for you to ask whatever questions you might have. So we're going to just kick off with, we have a short little video that we're going to play about the program, which hopefully will play.
There is so much that needs to be studied and explored, and it's be a good starting point. And what I mostly like about this program is the combination.
We do not want that to play again. I'm sorry. So that was just a short video of some images from our previous cohort of students who have been part of this 12-month MA program focused on Buddhist heritage. So we wanted to give you an overview of this program. So what you see currently on the screen, so those of you who are familiar with the Courtauld, or you may not be familiar with the Courtauld, the campuses that we currently have are in two different locations. So you see on the left, you see Somerset House. This is a beautiful historic building in the heart of central London. It's also the location of the Courtauld Galleries. And because this program, the MA in Buddhist Heritage, actually sits within the conservation department, though it is interdisciplinary, we do have part of our teaching at Somerset House and also at the image that you see on the right, which is the Vernon Square campus, which is located close to King's Cross. So it's also in a historic building. It's also in central London. So it's a really great program because I think we're the only program that actually teaches in both locations. And I wanted to kick off just by explaining where this program originated, because it is a very unusual program for the Courtauld in that it aims to touch upon the three disciplines that the Courtauld teaches. So it focuses on art history, it focuses on conservation, and it also focuses on curating. And it does this in a very interdisciplinary fashion, which is why Sujata Migama and I co-teach this program, and each of us brings our own experiences and our professional experience in our own disciplines. So here you see an image of the Mogao Grottos in Dunhuang. Some of you might be familiar with this site. It is a World Heritage Site located in the northwest of China. And the Courtauld has had a collaborative agreement with the Dunhuang Academy, which is the institution that's responsible for this amazing World Heritage Site. And the Courtauld, in particular, the Courtauld Wall Painting Conservation Department has had projects and has been working at this site. And it's through this collaboration that this program, which is focused on Buddhist heritage, emerged. So it really did come from a practical conservation project and relationship, but it has developed into a much more theoretical course, because this course is just 1 year in length. And, this is one of the cave temples at the site of Dunhuang. This is cave 260, and this is one of the caves, because there are nearly 500 of these painted Buddhist cave temples. And this was a project that the Courtaulds worked on very closely with the Dunhuang Academy. The Courtauld also was involved at a site in Bhutan, and you see here this image of Tango Monastery in Bhutan. And this was also a site of a practical conservation program. And you see some of the students here that were working on these amazing wall paintings at the site of Tango Monastery. So this is just to give you an overview of the reason why the Courtauld has this unusual program, which is, again, is focused on Buddhist heritage. And I included this slide here because this is a slide, this is UNESCO, and UNESCO is basically talking about how important sites of religious and spiritual significance are. And if you think about the World Heritage List, you've probably heard of sites that are on the World Heritage List. UNESCO has currently about 20% of all of their sites are sites that are listed because of their religious and spiritual significance. So we feel very strongly that this is a very important issue to be thinking about in terms of religious heritage and its current prominence. So I will be introducing, and then I'm going to let Sujata, I'm going to hand over to Sujata. But this course is not a practical conservation program. Because we are a 12-month program, we are much more focused on thinking about conservation from a more theoretical perspective. And this course takes a very broad approach to conservation. And I show here, this slide has 4 images, and these 4 images represent different ways that we think about conservation. So perhaps the image on the left, where you see a conservator who's has a syringe and he's injecting an adhesive into the wall paintings here. He's doing this as a means to stabilize, to conserve the paintings. So that is often what most people think of when they think of conservation. But the image to the right, where you see a big crowd of people, visitors are, a huge part of heritage sites. And they are, it is a experience that people want to have to visit these incredible World Heritage sites, but it's also something that we need to think about in terms of how we protect and preserve cultural heritage sites. Then the third image, you see incense burning, because the site, and these are all images from the Mogao Grottos in China. The burning of incense is, very much part of spiritual and religious practice. But it can also have a negative impact on the cave temples and on the wall paintings. So at the site of Dunhuang, they still allow religious worship and practice, but they've done it in a way where they've moved the incense burning outside of the caves. So it is a kind of compromise that is also seen as a form of conservation and preservation. And then finally, the image on the right, I don't know if you can make out what's happening there. There's an artist. You see all the little pots of paint, and he's actually doing a replica. He's doing a one-to-one detailed replica of one of the caves at the site again in China. And the reason for doing these replicas, there's a long history of replica making, and this is actually a form of preservation and protection as well, because these cave temples that are created, which are really works of art in themselves, provide an alternative means for which visitors can experience the site, where they don't necessarily have to crowd into the caves themselves, but can spend some time with an alternative approach to viewing the site. So I just show this as a way of, from my perspective, helping to inform you about some of the ideas and some of the things that we talk about over the course of the 12 months. So Sujata, should I hand over to you to talk about the program and the program structure?
Thank you, Laurie, for that introduction to our program. So as Laurie mentioned, we have a 12-month program, and our 12-month is structured in this manner where we have an autumn semester, a spring semester, and then students spend the summer writing, doing this really important piece of independent research. So in the autumn semester, we have these very foundational courses in both disciplines, in conservation and in art history. And Laurie teaches the conservation course, Conservation in a Buddhist Context, and I teach Art of Buddhist Worlds. And we also have points of contact, even though they are very separate courses that take place on separate days. Even so, we do make it a point to sort of come together and have these touch points where we think about shared concerns in both disciplines. In the spring semester, we come together, both art history and conservation come together in one module, and we both co-teach. And then that's followed by a study trip generally to Asia. We do work with a lot of colonial collections here in London, in the UK, and therefore we try our best to sort of give students that experience, that contrast with these living heritage sites, as Laurie pointed out earlier in some of her previous slides. And then students really start working on this piece of independent research, of course, with some supervision from the two main tutors. And students have time to have a nice chunk of time from around April to September to work on their independent research. What's the next slide?
As Sujata just explained, in the fall semester, because we don't, there are no requirements. I know it's a concern that many students have when they think about applying for this course, that they might need to, have previously studied conservation and art history, and we want to assure you that this is not necessary. And we have students that come with some experience, but we also have students that come from completely different majors. We've had students that come from, they're looking for a career change, or they're looking to pursue a topic that has been, really of great interest to them. So we teach these foundational courses in the fall to provide you with the enough knowledge to be successful in the course. So this fall, and we're actually just finishing, we're in the final week of the term right now. I teach a module which is focused on conservation in a Buddhist context. And I showed already some of these images, and I already talked about some of these images. So I won't go into more detail, but it's really to give you a good understanding of the conservation profession, the discipline, and how it intersects with Buddhist heritage. So we use a lot of case studies. It is a very experiential program, and we'll talk a bit about the site visits that we do as part of this program. Sujata, do you want to talk about your module?
Yes. So I teach a module that introduces students to art history as well as the skills. So it's not only a content-based course, it's very much also a module that introduces students to the basic methodologies in art history. And as Laurie mentioned, there are no prerequisites for this MA program. So we really have students who have sometimes some experience in taking art history courses. Maybe they've done their BA, or maybe they've never taken an art history course. And so we really start with the basics, and students get a chance to work with actual objects in person, learning visual analysis skills, and also getting a chance to present their research in museum spaces in front of their sort of object of choice in terms of research. And it's also structured in such a way that we try to cover as many regions as possible. Asia is a vast region, and Buddhist art history certainly is equally sort of vast in its sort of expansive sort of territories. But we also try not just to only focus on Buddhist art history in Asia, but we certainly take into account the diasporic context that we are part of in London, and we even do site visits to a Thai temple in Wimbledon, and you can see the last image of the earth goddess at this temple. And so we really try our best to include these site visits alongside lectures and seminars and reading and writing sessions, and really sort of create that foundation so that you'll be able to thrive in the next semester when we bring the two disciplines together.
So, as Sujata said, in the third module, which is the spring semester, we aim to bring together conservation and art history. And so, this slide is just showing some examples where, in the context of Buddhist heritage, if we think about the role of merit making, and also the role of traditional knowledge systems in the making of Buddha images, also wall paintings. There are a lot of issues that come up in terms of when we think about art historical research, as well as conservation approaches, thinking about also stakeholder communities and who should be involved in decision making. So these images are just showing, again, some case studies, and the three images on the left are from different sites in Bagan in Burma. And then the two images on the right are showing this type of painted architectural decoration at sites in China. And as I mentioned, we think a lot about decision making, how decisions are made about heritage, Buddhist heritage. And this includes both objects that might exist in museum collections or in temple collections or sites. And we see here, this is an image of it's merit-making practices again in Burma, where these worshippers are basically applying gold leaf to this Buddha image. And you can see, I mean, hopefully you can see just how much gold has been added to these figures, so much so that it sometimes becomes a conservation issue. So there is this need to kind of balance religious practice with also thinking about preservation and protection of these sites. We draw upon all different types of sources, and we really aim to expose you as much as possible to current research and literature. And these images are just showing some publications that focus on the conservation of living religious heritage, looking specifically at heritage in an Asian Buddhist context, also thinking about approaches to conservation, which is much more people-centered, and thinking about communities and how communities need to be involved in decision-making. Sujata, should I?
Sure. So in addition to all that classroom teaching and discussion and reading, all those wonderful resources that Laurie shared with us earlier, we do take a lot of field trips in all both semesters for all 3 modules. It's very important for students to be not only seeing and working with actual objects in museum collections or in galleries or at art fairs, but also visiting conservation labs, meeting conservators, and also curators. And as you probably know, London has vast collections of Buddhist materials, not only in the public collections like in the British Museum and the Victoria and Albert Museum, but also in library collections like the Public Library, British Library, but also in specialist collections, the Royal Asiatic Society. These are just photographs, images of some of the visits that we've been doing for the past 2 years. We've also taken students to collections outside of London. Last year we started visiting Chiddingstone Castle, where there are there's an interesting Buddhist art collection there as well. And as I mentioned earlier, also we do visit diasporic temples, and gives us a chance to not only see how Buddhism is being practiced in contemporary diasporic spaces, but also we get a chance to meet with the Sangha, the Buddhist monks, nuns, and also with the laity. And it's also a program that's very open to the idea that learning doesn't just take place in the classroom or only from experts in academia or from written published resources, but we also really believe in meeting communities who are practicing Buddhism and learning from them as well. And here are a couple of photographs of our visits to various conservation labs within London, as well as outside of London. And students do have a chance to use some equipment to do some really in-depth looking, as you can see in one of these photographs, as those objects are being prepared for an exhibition at the British Museum. We had the wonderful opportunity of seeing how conservators are working on them and then actually seeing them on display at the exhibition itself. Students also have had a chance to do handling sessions of certain Buddhist materials on this program. And we've also had the opportunity, of course, as I mentioned earlier, to take students to Asia on study trips. In our first year, we did a wonderful study trip to Sri Lanka, where students had a chance to visit 6 World Heritage Sites, as well as other temples that are not on the World Heritage List, which gives them a chance to see the different ways in which conservation decisions are being made in relation to sites that are considered important, and those that may not necessarily be. We also had the chance to sort of meet archaeologists, conservators, art historians, curators on this trip, and really hear from people on the ground who are working at some of these sites. To think about the challenges, the everyday challenges that some of these heritage professionals face. And here we have a couple of photographs here that show our students meeting other students at a university where we had a chance to also meet and present. We had the wonderful opportunity of visiting a Buddhist site, a cave site, Alovihara, in very close to the World Heritage Site of Kandy, where you can see in this photograph how a Buddhist monk is showing us how how we can write on palm leaf manuscripts, and there's supposed to be the site where the Tripitaka is supposed to have been first written. So there are all kinds of interesting experiences that one can experience on these study trips. Here we had an opportunity to visit various types of museums as well, not just national museums or site museums, but also a Buddhist museum, and also think about the idea of temple collections. Most of the time, we work on collections based in London, which have colonial histories, and we also would like to have students think about collections on site at temples, and how people on site, how the Sangha, how people who are caring for those collections look after those collections. And it's a great opportunity for us to think about accessibility as well, both in Asia as well as here in London. So there's a lot of experience, there's a lot of emphasis on experiential learning in this particular MA program. I can take this as well. So in addition to all the academic aspects of this program, we do have some fun things that go on. We have some social activities. Something that has become a tradition is our Lunar New Year tea party that takes place every year, and that brings the entire student community together, the MA students, the BA students, and the PhD students. And we also have a active public events program where we invite experts to come and speak at the Cotalk Research Forum. And actually tomorrow we are having a Buddhist Studies workshop where we'll have 4 speakers sharing their knowledge and their experiences with students. This is something that, we also encourage students to really use these opportunities here in London, not only at the very sort of active research forum calendar, going to all those events, but also attending events outside of the court hall. There are lots of events at other institutions, both museums and universities, that pertain to Buddhist heritage. And so your social calendar can become quite busy.
Great, and I think it's over to me now to talk about some of the practical elements. So we've heard a lot about why you're interested in studying this fantastic program. I'll tell you can get your app in, some of the kind of details around that. So the applications launched a few weeks ago. The application deadline is 20th of January 2025. And this year, just one kind of general note, we have sort of revamped our postgraduate taught program application system. So it's sort of standardized applications across our postgraduate programs. And so do take a look at the how to apply page and kind of the program guidance across the range of programs that we offer. And the majority of those programs, the deadline is the 20th of January, alongside also scholarship applications, which I'll go into in just a moment. So the entry requirements, it's already been mentioned somewhat that we have a flexible approach to entry requirements, in so much that we appreciate that people will be coming to study this program, a variety of different academic backgrounds and professional experience. We do typically look for what we say a kind of good 2-1, which is kind of equivalent to a kind of 65% in UK systems. My team are always happy to guide and advise you if you're applying from outside of the UK and kind of need an equivalent your prior study. A note too about kind of written work, language requirements as well. So we, if you're looking to apply and you come from a country where you might need to provide evidence of English language, we typically point people to the IELTS test and look for a score of 7 overall with no less than a 6.5 in reading and writing. But there are other ways of providing an exemption if you've studied in the UK or in an English language majority speaking country. And our website has a whole ton of guidance on how you might provide that kind of exemption or take other forms of test to provide that kind of English language requirement as well. In terms of the application, what you need to submit, you'll obviously to provide like a transcript, the kind of evidence of a prior study. You'll also need to provide a written work sample. This will typically be around 3,000 to 5,000 words. It's a flexible submission, so it's a kind of uploaded. We typically advise you to provide something that's been marked previously, maybe a full work or an excerpt from a longer piece, a dissertation perhaps. Indeed, if you want to combine 2 shorter pieces of work, that's entirely acceptable as well. If you've been out of education for some time, you can write a new piece, or if you've studied something that isn't necessarily directly related, sometimes it might be, something that is a preference to write a new piece of work as well. What's really useful is to contextualize what you're submitting. So at the start of the document, just to include a little bit of a kind of context of where this written work sample has come from. So if it's part of your undergraduate dissertation, if it's 2 works that are smaller in length that you're combining or kind of providing both, just tell us what those are. It really helps kind of frame the work that you're submitting there. There's other elements too that we are looking for in terms of the application, a CV, passport, etc. But what is often of interest to people is a key part, which is the personal statement. So for the application form, this kind of slightly renewed form, you'll have initially a 300-word personal statement, which is where you might want to outline, why you want to study at the Courtauld, your own personal relevant study, projects, work experience, kind of key transferable skills into the program. In addition to that kind of personal statement, if you will, there's a 300-word program-specific statement, and that's where you go into a bit more detail about, the program and what you've, things that you've done previously that kind of relate to it, and also perhaps not that we expect you to know what you want to do in 5 years' time, but a little bit of that, of where you see this program being of benefit to you in terms of your study or your professional career afterwards, and can really help make for a strong application if we sort of see where this fits into your overall plans. Just to go on from the application form itself onto some other kind of practical parts of how we consider things. You will also, actually, before I go on to that, just to head off questions that we always get around the application form references. And I know we'll always get questions about this. So before I move on, I'll cover that too briefly. We asked for 2 references. We typically say that it would be good to submit 2 academic references. And obviously, depending on when it was that you last studied, that becomes more or less difficult. You know, if you've been out of education for some time, sometimes it can be a bit more challenging to provide 2 academic references. Indeed, it could also be that you've worked recently in a particularly relevant context. And in that case, you might value a professional reference as well. It's really, your responsibility as an applicant to kind of determine who those referees, that are available to you, which of those will be best placed to kind of comment on your academic abilities, your kind of, your interest in the subject to a certain extent too. And depending on where those referees are kind of coming from, if it's a professional context or if it's from a different education system, it's good to let them be asking for the reference, but also to give them a little bit of guidance as to what that might be, because something we might see sometimes from a professional reference context is it's quite short, and actually there's a lot that we can really get from the reference. So there's guidance that's on our website that goes into a bit more detail. Also, when the referee is invited to submit the reference, they get a lot more kind of guidance too in what to provide, the kind of length that should be. So they'll get a bit of that guidance when they actually submit the reference too. That kind of gives you a sense of what we're looking for there. And I know that's always a popular question that we get when we throw that out to applicants' questions. So now moving on to the kind of funding part of things. So there's a general MA Courtauld Scholarship, which, as I mentioned earlier, the applications will open shortly for that. The deadline will be the 20th of January, and that is a range of awards that will be up to 15,200 to cover a year of study. The Buddhist program also has its own specific program-specific funding from the Robert Ho Foundation scholarships, and there's a kind of generous number of awards that are available through that. It will be sort of through the same application process, some of the kind of same criteria that we'll be looking for there, the same kind of deadline as well. And we're always happy to provide a bit more information about that and what you can supply as part of the application in due course too. And then just to touch upon accommodation, so we have our own halls of residence. That is Duchy House, situated really close to the Somerset House campus. In addition to Duchy House, we have rooms through the University of London Intercollegiate Halls. And we typically say that these are kind of prioritised for international students, but in truth, if you're applying from the UK and you're based outside of London in the southeast, you may have a good chance of getting into the halls of residence as well. So don't necessarily discount that. And my team and the Students' Union are always at hand to kind of give you some guidance and some ideas if you want to look outside of halls of residence as well, with the private rental market, which is of course a popular option for many postgraduate students. That pretty much sums up some of the practical bits of guidance that I would have. Are there other slides that the two of you have to provide after this? And if not, I guess we can start to open it out to questions.
Thank you so much, Alex. I think we are now in the Q&A period. So hopefully you have questions that you want to pop in the Q&A. You also see here you can contact PG Admissions with any questions, and you can also contact Sujata and I directly. So we encourage you to reach out and to keep in touch.
I believe there are 2 questions in the Q&A, and that's a question about the conservation part of the course.
I can't see the questions. All right.
So one of the questions is, I noticed that there is no minimum science education to apply for this course. How scientifically adept should students be regarding the conservation part of the course? Thank you.
That's a great question, and I really appreciate you asking that. Because this is, as I mentioned, it's this is a one-year program, and we do not teach practical conservation, and the Courtauld does have practical conservation programs, which are 3 years in length. They have a program focused on wall painting conservation and easel painting conservation. But the Courtauld in general, for all of the conservation programs, they do not require prerequisite work in science. There's no chemistry requirements that you might be familiar with other programs, such as some programs in North America. They have chemistry requirements. So just to be clear, we have no expectations that you will need to have any prior knowledge in the sciences. We will have some teaching and exposure to that for you, but because again, this program is much more focused on the theoretical side of Buddhist heritage, we're not really going into great depth about, excuse me, about that requires scientific background at all. So, but thank you for asking that.
Thank you, Lori. And there is another question as well. So I'm just going to read it out so that everybody knows what it is. It's how many days per week are students on campus? So that's another great question. I mean, we do have two foundational modules in the first semester, and they are on separate days. There's a bit of a reading load, so we don't really want to schedule them on the same days. So generally, students are on campus on Monday, Wednesday for one module, for module 1, and for module 2, it's generally Tuesday, Thursday. There's also a third module that we offer, which is an academic skills course that's run once a week as well. So I would say in the first semester, students are on campus around 4 days a week. Students do have, all Courtauld students have the opportunity to also audit other classes. There are so many other amazing, wonderful modules that are happening. If you have the time and the interest, you can certainly audit those as well. In the second semester, it's slightly different. We generally meet only twice a week when both tutors come together to teach art history and conservation of Buddhist heritage. And generally, the way it's a semester system and the way the second semester is structured, we do have in both semesters, actually, we do have a reading week, but in the second semester, we have not only a reading week, but we also have a 3-week Easter break followed by week 12 in April. And then after that, we have the study trip, which is like 1 or 2 weeks. And then students generally spend time on their own writing their dissertation. So they're not expected to come to university.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that yeah, I mean, as you saw, we do quite a few site visits, and some of those site visits can be a half day in length or even a full day in length for the trips that take us outside of London. So there are occasions where the class will be a bit longer, but this is all information that you'll be provided with ahead of time.
I believe we have a third question, and perhaps Alex can answer that. The question is, hi, I'm from Scotland. Would applications for student accommodation still be difficult? Also, what would be the average scholarship amount if successful offered by the Edge and Ho Foundation?
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, Scotland, I think, is certainly in the category where, yeah, even within the UK, I think the distance from London and the southeast is such that you would have a fairly good chance. It obviously depends on what the demand is in an individual year, but yeah, certainly you would have a reasonable chance of securing accommodation. So yeah, you would absolutely be encouraged to get an application in, and like I say, there's no guarantee. It really depends on what the demand is and the priority kind of list that we look down is kind of prior study in the UK or London specifically, but also distance from London as well within that. So depending on the number of applications we get, that you could certainly be in consideration, and I would warmly encourage you to apply. In terms of the average scholarship amount for students who get a Ho Foundation funding, I think the level of funding varies across kind of a number of awards that we are able to give out each year. The exact amounts we're not in a position to confirm at this point. In the past, I can say it's varied from kind of covering fees through to kind of a £10,000 amount. So it can vary depending on the number of students and the number of awards that we have in an individual year. But it gives you a sense that it can vary from, in some cases, a kind of a full fees award through to slightly smaller awards. It depends on a number of factors, but absolutely, get the application for the scholarships in, and either being considered for the general MA or for the program-specific funding in this instance. You'll be considered for both as part of that same process. So, again, really warmly encourage you to get an application.
Thank you, Alex. And we do have another question about accommodation. When do accommodation applications open?
It's a really good question. I think it typically, for our own accommodation, will open kind of in the springtime. We'll certainly, once we get more information on the exact dates and the kind of process for this year, we'll send that out to you. But typically, it's kind of in the springtime, often after the offers are made, which generally tends to be kind of February, March, somewhere around that, and maybe in a month or so afterwards is when we start to get out information about the application process for accommodation.
Thank you, Alex. We have another question for you. Apologies, I'm not sure if I missed this answer, but when did you say scholarship applications open?
That should be imminent. So some of the information and the eligibility criteria, certainly for the general scholarship as well, are up on the website at the moment. The application form is going to follow. Really, it should be by in the next week, I would imagine. It's going to be a relatively short window from when that launches through to the 20th of January. But we'll certainly, if you've got an in-progress application.
I'm not sure what just happened. Anyways, I think from what I understood, the deadline is the 20th of January. And I would definitely, if you have any further questions, I would reach out to PJ Admissions, and you can contact Alex directly that way if you have additional questions.
Are there any other questions for either Laurie and me about the program?
We do, and I'm sure you probably have already seen this, but you can also look at our website for more information about the program and also more information about the Robert H. N. Ho Center, because the program is part of this center that was endowed by the Robert H. N. Ho Family Foundation. And as Sujata has mentioned, the center itself also has public programs, and it has some recordings of past speakers who have come to present as part of the research forum. So you could also be interested in seeing some of the past programming that we've had.
think there's another question in the chat.
Okay, so if we have already, thanks, Shika. If you've already have postgraduate diplomas in art history, but on Buddhist art history and conservation, would there still be in-depth art historical knowledge to be gained? Thank you. Yes, I mean, we will be spending a good chunk of time in that first semester exploring different Buddhist art historical traditions, using the London collections, but also sites in Asia. And I think what's also different from a usual sort of art history program is that there's always this question of conservation. And you get a chance to, of course, think about some of these objects and sites alongside a conservator like my colleague Laurie, and have those interesting conversations and important conversations that might not necessarily take place in a purely sort of art history class. I also want to point out that even though one might think that this is very much because we're based in London and we have access to these amazing collections here, it's also important to keep in mind that this is not just an object-centered module or program that sites too are considered to be an essential part of one's study in this particular program. And also one gets to do interesting assessments, not just write essays, but also do a fascinating assessment where it's called the virtual exhibition, where one gets a chance to think about how one might curate a group of Buddhist objects, not necessarily only in a museum, but also perhaps at a temple in a very different place. So there are lots of interesting and different things to learn and do in this MA program.
Thank you for that excellent question. I would just add to what Sujata has already said, is just to stress that this program is really interdisciplinary at its core. And I know we've had many students who have come from art history degrees or undergraduate art history degrees or have done master's level art history programs. And I think they always feel that there's new information to gain because we are really trying to kind of push the boundaries of individual disciplines and expose students to many other fields that intersect with their own. So in addition to conservators and scientists, we also engage with curators and with archaeologists and site managers. So we're really trying to, think differently and, challenge ourselves to push beyond our individual disciplines to see what more we can actually do in terms of our research and our practice. Sujata, do we have any other questions?
No, but thank you everyone for joining us today and for asking all these great and very helpful questions. If you have any, questions or concerns, you know where to find me and Laurie. You can also always reach out to Alex as well. So we hope this was a helpful session for y'all about our MA program. And we hope that we can stay in touch. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining.